聴者さんからいただいた質問にお答えします。今回は5人からいただきました。ありがとうございます。少し難しい質問が来てますので、できるだけ分かりやすく解説していきますね。あとはいつものスタイルとちょっと違って、この画面、このパソコンの画面を見ながら話しますので、ちょっと雰囲気が変わりますからね。あとはフルテロップを入れないことにしました。大事なところだけを、そういうグラフィックス、そのテロップを入れることにしましたので、よろしくお願いします。The first question is from Caramel. Hi Caramel, thanks for your question. Here's what it says. I would like to know about how to use quite. British and Americans use it in the different ways. I really want to use it with confidence. If you've already explained it in the videos, you can just ignore my question. Nope, I'm not going to ignore your question. I'm going to try and answer it. So how do we use the word quite? Now, I use it quite a lot. I'm using it right now. So first things first, it is a degree adverb. Now, this means something which can vary depending on the context, a degree adverb. Now, if you use it with a gradable adjective, it usually means fairly or somewhat. You know, just a little bit. It's quite. So what's a gradable adjective? I can hear you saying. A gradable adjective usually means something which can vary in intensity. So you get different levels of the same adjective. So some examples would be words like interesting, small, hot, good, bad, those kinds of things. An example would be, the hotel room was quite small. So the hotel room was moderately small. It wasn't like really, really small. It was quite small. So that's one way of using quite. Now, if you use it with a non-gradable adjective, it sounds so much stronger. So what is a non-gradable adjective? Those are the adjectives which represent absolute states. They don't change in levels of intensity. So examples would be words like excellent or delicious, tiny, enormous, or exhausted. So you can't say, I'm quite exhausted. Sounds funny because you're always 100% exhausted. It's not just a little bit delicious. Delicious is delicious. So those are called non-gradable adjectives. So quite often means completely or absolutely when you're using it with those types of adjectives. An example would be, her performance was quite amazing. So that means her performance was absolutely amazing. So you can feel it's like really, really amazing. It was quite amazing. Now, let's talk about the differences between the way British people and American people use the word quite. So it's kind of interesting. So, Caramel, you actually talked about this in your question. So in British English, quite usually implies a moderate degree of, of something. So what does it say there? It says, 適当な程度 or 中ぐらいの. So it's kind of like in the middle, it's moderate. So the film was quite enjoyable, although some of the acting was weak. So the film was moderately enjoyable. It wasn't fantastic, it was quite enjoyable. In American English, quite often implies a higher degree, similar to the word very. So we've examined the report quite thoroughly. We've examined the report very thoroughly. So can you feel the difference? Generally speaking, when British people use the word quite, it usually means moderate. But when American people use the word quite, it's closer to very. Okay? So how would we use quite in a conversation? So if a British person said quite nice, then it's not bad, it's moderately nice. 悪くないね. If an American person said quite nice, then they would probably mean it's very nice. すごくいいね. That kind of thing. And then if a British person said quite expensive, then I feel it's not all that expensive. It's moderately expensive. ちょっと高いですね。In American English, it might feel a little bit stronger. By saying quite expensive, they may feel it's very expensive. かなり高いです。Now, one more thing that British people tend to do is to change the intensity of the word by how the word is stressed. How much stress you put in the word, yeah? So this doesn't happen quite so much in, in American English. So if you said, I'm quite tired, it could mean you're very tired. But if you said, I'm quite tired, it means I'm somewhat tired, a little bit tired. So that's my take on how the word quite is used. Okay, Caramel? Next up, we got a question from Mitsuru. It's quite a long one here, so let me just read it through. Hello there, my eldest boy is supposed to take a test to enter high school. He influenced me to study English grammar of junior high's level. I've been studying about past perfect tense these days. A native speaker's YouTuber, I forgot his name, says that they rarely use past perfect tense, use past tense. He says that they couldn't use difficult grammatical ways in the conversation quickly. I really would like to know real English grammar of native speakers' conversation. I googled the past perfect tense. I can find example sentences like these. The train had already left when we arrived at the station. He had left before I got there, etc. When people explain that something you did in chronological order, can you say it all by the past tense? I need lots of examples in daily conversation. I'd be happy if you could tell me some. Thank you. Okay, Mitsuru-san, let's have a look here. First, I want to give you a basic rundown of what is the past perfect tense. So actually, we need to understand what it is before we can talk about it and how we use it. So probably there's some other people watching right now who are not 100% sure of how the past perfect tense works. So now, apparently, in regards to this grammatical structure, there is no equivalent in Japanese. So that makes it really confusing about how and when you should actually use it. So yeah, it's always been a thorn in my side explaining all these kinds of grammatical issues when there's actually nothing to compare it to in the Japanese language perfectly. So basically it shows that one past action occurred before another past action. You know what I mean? So what is it? I put down here, 過去のある出来事が別の出来事よりも前に起こったことを明確にする、表現として使います。So how do we make it? Well, we use had plus the past participle. It's very simple how it's made. So making it is not the problem. It's how it's used and in what situation you use it, which is kind of the problem for a lot of people. So it would be something like had done, which in Japanese would be something along the lines of nani nani teita. Okay? So for example, 彼はすでにご飯を食べていた. He had already eaten. He has already eaten. Yeah, had already eaten. Sorry, I made a mistake there. Let's look at a few more examples. So pay attention to the importance of sequence in this one. I had eaten breakfast before I left for work. So you can you feel the sequence there? Before I left for work, I eat breakfast. I had eaten breakfast before I left for work. So breakfast is finished, and then the next stage, I'm going to work. Another example would be, she had finished her homework before dinner. So before she actually sat down to eat her dinner, she completed the task of the homework. This job is completely finished. It's gone away. Now we're going to the next stage, which is dinner. So she had finished her dinner. She had finished her homework before dinner. Now, I know this seems kind of complicated, but it's useful when we're talking about a sequence, like an order of events. So basically to indicate that one past action happened before another past action. This one happened first, And then this happened. That's very useful when you're using this grammatical structure. Let's look at a few more examples. By the time we arrived, the movie had started. There you go. That's perfectly understandable, isn't it? So, which one happened first? The movie started. Which one happened second? We arrived. By the time we arrived, the movie had started. You can really feel the sequence there. Here's another example. He had left before the meeting began. Which one happened first? He left. Which one happened second? The meeting began. So he had left before the meeting began. So you can really feel the sequence, like the order of events. That's what it's all about. That's why it's really useful in English. So now, to answer Mitsuru's question, do native speakers actually use this grammatical structure in real-life conversations? To be honest, in conversation like casual conversation, it is used less. It's true, a lot of people would just go ahead and use the simple past tense, but there are times when you need to be clear, and then it's really essential. So my key point here is understanding the past perfect tense helps to clarify the sequence of past events in your sentences. So it's all about being clear. If you need to be really clear, then this is a really useful tense. They had never traveled abroad before last year. So you can see, before last year, they had never traveled abroad. We had just sat down to eat when the phone rang. So you can really feel the sequence there. We had just sat down to eat, that action was finished, and then the phone rang. We had just sat down to eat, and then the phone rang. Now, just to make it extra clear, let's compare how some sentences would look and sound if you said them in the simple past tense and in the past perfect tense. Should be interesting. So the first example is this. In the past perfect, she had already eaten when he arrived. Using the simple past, she ate when he arrived. So this one is, using the past perfect is the perfect choice, as it states clearly what happened first and what happened next. But when it's just the simple past, to be honest with you, I have no idea what is happening. It's very confusing. So this is a really good example of please use the past perfect. You need to use it. It just makes more sense. Example number 2 is this. In the past perfect, by the time we got to the station, the train had left. If we say it in the simple past, the train left when we got to the station. So you can really feel in this comparison, the sequence is really clear when we use the past perfect. Now, one big reason is because we're using the phrase by the time. And this is also helping us to visualize the sequence. When we use the simple past, it's kind of unclear, and I'm left thinking about what actually happened. So in this case, we really need to use the past perfect to be 100% clear and accurate. In the third example, in the past perfect, after the guests had gone home, we cleaned the house. In the simple past, after the guests went home, we cleaned the house. Now, this comparison is a very good example of when it's sometimes okay to use just the simple past and it's not all that confusing. So you can see in those 3 examples, the first 2, we really need to use the past perfect, but in the third example, actually it's not so important. So, in conclusion, Mitsuru, for the most part, this sentence, if the sentence is in any way kind of confusing in terms of sequence, then you should use the past perfect tense. However, if it's just like a really simple sentence, native speakers sometimes get lazy and just use the simple past. It happens, it happens. So it's kind of a case by case thing. Probably not the answer you wanted to hear, Mitsuru, but I guess it is what it is. And one more point which I'd like to add too is probably I'd say that British people prefer to use the past perfect tense a little bit more than our American friends who, let's be honest, they sometimes use the simpler form of English, and in British English we tend to sometimes use the overly complicated version. So yeah, that's another factor that we have to consider. So maybe the teacher that you heard from before, I guess he was another YouTuber, possibly he was from America, I'm not too sure, but yeah, there you go. Next question we've got is from Yoshi489. And here are his questions. We actually had more than one question. I have some questions. Number 1, Jimmy said, I would fly if I were Superman. Number 2, Jimmy said that he would fly if he were Superman. Are these sentences both proper? I often get confused about the future perfect form and the future perfect progressive form. Number 3, Scott has known Virgil for 2 years. Scott will have known Virgil for 5 years in 3 years. Number 5, Alan has been to Canada twice. 6, Alan is going to Canada next month. Number 7, Alan will have been to Canada 3 times next month. 8, Gordon has been teaching English for 2 years. 9, Gordon will have been teaching English for 5 years in 3 years. Are these sentences all proper? I hope my questions will be picked. So, Yoshi489, your question was picked. So I checked all of your sentences and all of them were absolutely correct. They were all fine. So it looks like you have a pretty firm grasp on how to build the sentences themselves. But let's take a quick review for the benefit of everybody watching this video on both of those structures, starting with the future perfect tense. So how is it made? It's made with will have plus past participle. Now, what situation do we use it in? It shows an action that will be completed before a specific time in the future. 未来のある時点までに完了する出来事を述べる時制? Does that say 時制? Sorry, I can't read properly. So an equivalent style of this sentence in Japanese would probably look something like this. 来年までにこのプロジェクトを終わらせます。I will have finished this project by next year. By next summer, I will have saved enough money to buy a new car. So here we're using some kind of timestamp by next summer. So it's really important to have that kind of thing in it. By next summer, I will have saved enough money to buy a new car. And the end goal is to buy a new car. And you're kind of giving yourself like a deadline. We will have arrived in Thailand by this time tomorrow. There you go. Again, we've got another kind of a timestamp in there. By this time tomorrow, this event will have been completed. So we will have arrived in Thailand by this time tomorrow. Another example, I will have eaten all the pizza by the time you get home. So the timestamp there is by the time you get home. It's kind of like the deadline, the finish line. And by that time, I'm going to have completed eating all the pizza. It's going to be in my belly. Wow, it's kind of a true story, that. Now, next up, we're going to look at the future perfect progressive tense. That's a bit of a mouthful. So, will have been plus present participle, which is basically an ing verb. Present participle is kind of a fancy grammatical way of saying an ing verb. Now, this emphasizes the duration. Key point there, emphasizes the duration of an action up to a specific point in the future. Wow. Should I try and read this one? No, I'm going to skip that one. Forgive me, you can read it. You're much better at reading than me. The key point here is that we're focusing on the duration. How long, how many years, how many months, what's the duration? So, as there is no equivalent to this in Japanese, it would probably look something like this. 彼は来年まで10年間この会社で働いていることになる。He will have been working at this company for 10 years as of next year. Okay? So as of next year is like the time limit, it's like the deadline, the finish line. By that time, this will have been completed. This will have been done. Let me read it again. He will have been working at this company for 10 years as of next year. Another example, next month, she will have been working at the company for 5 years. So next month, 5 years is going to be complete. She will have been working at the company for 5 years. It's not happened yet, but we're kind of like talking about the future, something which is going to happen very soon by this time. Okay? When he retires, he will have been teaching for 40 years. So right now, at this point, he hasn't been teaching for 40 years. But by that time, he will have been teaching for 40 years. Now maybe it's like 39 years and 6 months, or maybe it's like 38 years, but looking into the future, he will have been teaching for 40 years. Okay? By the time the movie starts, they will have been queuing for over an hour. So maybe the movie starts at 3 o'clock and they started queuing at like 1:30. So by the time the movie actually starts, they will have been queuing for over an hour. It's talking about the duration. Okay, so the future perfect progressive tense emphasizes the duration of time of an action leading up to a specific future moment. Okay, so it's kind of a complicated one because you don't have the exact translation or the exact version in Japanese, but I hope that kind of made it a little bit clearer. Okay, thank you very much for your question, Yoshi489. Next up, we got a question from Rick. Rick Ito 999. What a name. So actually, Rick, you sent me a couple of messages, one with a kind of amended version. So I'm just going to read out some of the key points here. By the way, here are my questions. They're concerning seem, look like, and the other related thing. The first question is kind of a simple one. That is, what is the difference between seem and look like? For me, both feel like they're similar. But if you tell me the difference between them, that'd be much appreciated. The other question is concerning will. Maybe you know an English YouTuber named Nick. He's also making lots of YouTube-related English, and they are also very useful. In one of his videos, he teaches us that a translation for will can be nani nani shisou. I think he gave us an example like mosugu ame furiso. Can be it will rain soon. However, I think usual Japanese English learners translate it like, it seems to be rainy soon. Anyway, and then we had other kind of things going on there. So yeah, there was a lot of information and he kind of came back and said, I'm understanding what he said now. So first and foremost, yes, I know Nick Williamson. He is an incredible YouTuber and I also watch his videos because he is just such a good teacher. So yeah, so from what I can gather, Rick, you're asking the difference between seem and look like, as in, it seems like it's going to rain, or it looks like it's going to rain. It's a really interesting question, actually. Okay, so let's break this down to try and see how it all works. Now, the phrases it seems like and it looks like are often used interchangeably in English. Yeah. But they often contain, I don't know, slightly different nuances based on the type of observation. And also, this is a key point, from the viewer's perspective. So they can be interchangeable, but they can change. So the first one we're going to look at is it looks like. So this is a visual observation. You're actually looking at something and making some kind of judgment or decision. So this phrase is primarily used when making judgment based on visual clues. You're using your eyes. So the conclusion is drawn from what the speaker sees. So if you said, it looks like it's going to rain, then the speaker might see dark clouds or other visual indicators suggesting that rain is coming soon. So it's all about the visuals. What can you actually see? So we're using the word looks. It looks like it's going to rain. Well, now let's compare that to it seems like. So this phrase is used when you're forming an opinion based on various pieces of information. So it's not only limited to visual, it's various forms and types of information. And one more thing is, it often implies a degree of uncertainty. So you're not 100% sure. Basically, you're not really like, if you use looks like, you're more sure. But if you're using seems like, then you're a little bit less sure. Do you know what I mean? So when we compare it to looks like, the possibility of rain is less, or basically unknown. We just don't have enough clear information. It seems like it's going to rain. The speaker might consider factors such as humidity, weather forecasts, or even the smell in the air. So not just visual signs. You're getting a lot of different forms of information, putting them together and coming to a conclusion. So let's look at a few other non-weather examples. It looks like he's enjoying the party. It seems like he's enjoying the party. So, of course, if you're looking at your friend, he's over there at the party, he's dancing, he's laughing, he's having a few drinks. Yeah, it looks like he's enjoying the party. But if maybe you can't see him all that clearly, you don't have so much visual stuff going on there, maybe he's having a good time, I'm not too sure. So in that case, you would say, seems like he's having a good time. But if you really can see visual cues, it looks like he's having a good time. Can you feel the difference? It looks like she has a lot on her mind. It seems like she has a lot on her mind. Again, it looks like maybe she's going like this. You're visually looking and you can say, she's stressing out. But maybe she's not doing anything quite so visually. You have to get from her tone of voice, or maybe the way she's working, or just the way her facial expression is. Maybe it's a little more difficult to tell. So it seems like she has a lot on her mind. Again, I hope you can feel the difference. It looks like he's been working hard lately. It seems like he's been working hard lately. Again, if someone looks so tired, they have big black marks like a big panda underneath their eyes, and they're like sleeping on the desk. It looks like he's been working hard lately. But if he just makes a few comments here and there, I'm a little bit tired, I've been so busy lately, he seems like he's been working hard lately. Which one is more clear? Of course, looks like. Now, if we were to compare them in Japanese, nani nani mitai desu for looks like. Nani nani you desu for seems. If we were to apply that to the last set of sentences that I made there, it would be something like this. It looks like he's been working hard lately. 彼は最近一生懸命働いてるみたいです。And then it seems like he's been working hard lately. 彼は最近一生懸命働いてるようです。Maybe you can feel the difference a little bit in Japanese. I hope that's accurate. So that's my take on what look like versus seems like. That's the feeling between the both of them. So I probably didn't answer all of your questions, Rick, because your message was kind of all over the place a little bit. So I wasn't entirely sure of the second question, but hopefully I answered that part of the question. My explanation might not have been exactly what Nick said in his video, but his explanation was probably much better than mine. He is an absolute legend. But, I gave it my best shot. The next question we've got here is from Hannah Hirano. Now, thanks thanks Hirano. Thanks Hannah for all your amazing input in the channel. Hannah is one of the most active members of the little community we've got here on YouTube. So this is the question. Hey Scott, in your February 22 video titled 知らなかった prefer の意外な使い方を紹介, you said, I prefer if you tell me beforehand when you don't need any dinner. I prefer if you'd sit down and eat. I prefer if you'd keep your nose out of my business. Here, the contraction I'd stands for I would, right? What about you'd? Is it short for you would or you could? The phrase I would prefer it if appears in the Longman Dictionary. Is the it commonly dropped in spoken language, and does the same rule apply to I'd appreciate it if you could? Would your sentences be more grammatically accurate with past tense verbs? I prefer if you told me beforehand when you don't need any dinner. I prefer if you sat down and ate. I prefer if you kept your nose out of my business. Looking forward to your thoughts. Okay, Hannah, thanks very much for your questions. Let's take a look at your first point. So, I prefer if you'd sit down and eat. So here, you asked actually, here the contraction I'd stands for I would, right? What about you'd? Is it short for you would or you could? In the sentence, I prefer if you'd sit down and eat. Both contractions, I'd and you'd, stand for would. I'd, this is a contraction for I would. Full form is I would prefer. Here, would is being used to express like a polite or conditional preference. You'd, this is a contraction of you would. Full form would be you would sit down and eat. So in this context, would indicates like a polite suggestion or expectation about the listener's actions. Okay? Therefore, both contractions in this sentence represent the word would. And they're used to like really politely express preferences and possibly suggestions. The big question is, can we use could in this situation? Yes, we can. We can. But it doesn't seem to fit all that well for me personally. Could is often used to inquire about someone's ability to do something. But in polite requests, it also conveys a sense of politeness. So could you please open the window is a good example. Asking if you are able to open the window. Could you please open the window? But on the other hand, would is a little bit different. So it indicates willingness. Willingness. Do you want to? It's like could, but it's like talking more about are you willing to? Will you do it for me? Or usually in a polite request. So you could say something like, would you please open the door? So this is a window, a window. Would you please open the window? Politely requesting you to open the window. So in the original sentence, I said, I prefer if you'd sit down and eat. Would is used to politely express a preference for the listener's actions. So both could and would are acceptable for making polite requests, but, and here's the key point, would often emphasizes the listener's willingness. Let's move on to your second point. So, is the it commonly dropped in spoken language? I would prefer it if. So, in both spoken and written English, it's standard to include it. It's true in this phrase. So, omitting it can sound awkward or incomplete, but I know a lot of people, especially American speakers, like to drop it. So I kind of went for the US style in my examples. So yeah, again. So the best situation to use this would be, I would prefer it if you sat down. That's the best, that's the perfect, that's the textbook, that's the grammatically perfect way. However, it is acceptable, and some people do speak like this. I would prefer if you sat down. We didn't use the it. Talking about appreciate, I'd appreciate it if. Similarly, it is typically retained in this expression to maintain clarity and grammatical correctness. But a lot of native speakers, again, don't follow the rules of grammar. Those pesky native speakers, eh? So in the best case scenario, I'd appreciate it if you could help me. But it is acceptable to say, I'd appreciate if you could help me. Therefore, speaking on a conclusion here, it's best to include it for 100% accuracy. Okay? But in conversation, it's not the end of the world if you don't. It's not such a big deal, but if you're taking like the TOEIC test or the ACEN or something where you have to be 100% accurate, then definitely go for it. But in daily conversation, a lot of speakers do tend to drop it. Now, moving on to your last point, Hannah. Would your sentences be more grammatically accurate with past tense verbs? That's a really good question. So let's delve into this one. So using past tense verbs in these sentences is indeed grammatically appropriate, as it all aligns with the polite and hypothetical tone. So let's look at the sentence. I'd prefer if you sat down and ate. Hear that crow there? So here, sat and ate are the past tense forms of sit and eat, of course, respectively. So everyone knows that. So in conditional sentences like this, using the past tense after would prefer is standard. Yeah, standard, no problem. It's very good. I would prefer if you took your feet off the table. I would prefer if you gave me some advance warning. I would prefer if you stopped looking at your phone. So the big question is this. What's the difference between these two sentences? I'd prefer it if you'd sit down and eat. I'd prefer it if you sat down and ate. Oh, kind of similar but different. Similar but different. Well, they're both saying exactly the same thing, essentially. But there is one big difference. What is that big difference? The repetition of would. See, there's two woulds. So the repetition of would in the first one gives an extra layer of politeness and suggests a kind of a more hypothetical or less direct request. So it means that I really want you to do something, but I don't expect you to do it. So in the video that you talked about, Dylan's mum, Sachko, she was kind of making a kind of an indirect, very polite request. Well, I'd prefer if you tell me beforehand when you don't need any dinner. I've been slogging away all day in this kitchen. Sorry, Mum. My bad. She didn't really expect him to comply with the request, but she's hoping. So that's what it's all about. So I hope I answered your question in some small way there, Hannah. And again, thanks again for all your support as usual. So that brings our question and answer time to a conclusion. I hope you got something new out of it. And I will be doing these kind of videos periodically, maybe every couple of months or so. So if you do have any questions, think them up, keep them in your brain. And when I do ask for them, please send them to me. I'll put a little kind of a community post every 6 weeks or every couple of months. So if you do have any questions, feel free to ask me and I'll do my best to answer them. Okay? Well, thanks very much for watching and we'll see you soon. Bye.